Hey, Diana. Good afternoon. It's great to meet you.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod and talking with me. It's a pleasure to meet you. I know we've been messaging a little bit back and forth, and I've certainly been looking through your bio and some of the information that you have posted on LinkedIn, and I am so excited for this conversation and intrigued and just really looking forward to this for our community. So thank you for taking time out of your day to talk with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm super excited. Teresa spoke very highly of you, and I was just on one of her YouTube segments, so really excited for the conversation.
Oh, wonderful. What were you and Teresa collaborating on?
Yeah, so I met Teresa a couple of months ago. She has been a very powerful advocate, as you know, and I was introduced to her work kind of by chance, and we ended up meeting and having a great conversation. Oh, I believe it was actually for one of the research studies she was doing. And she was asking about my experience with autism, and I am 25 years old now. I was diagnosed on the spectrum really recently, actually just about 6 months ago at age 24. So I had just found out about my diagnosis when she reached out, and it was very timely. So yeah, that's how we met, and she's ended up really believing in a lot of the work that we've been working on, which I'm happy to share about at some point in this conversation.
Excellent. Well, I definitely look forward to looking at that YouTube later, so I'm so glad that you brought that up. Yeah, Teresa is definitely a wonderful advocate. She's the studies that she is spearheading in the field are very exciting, and I mean, let's not forget how brilliant she is. I mean, she's so incredibly smart, and I've sent her science that it's a little bit difficult for maybe me as a parent to tease apart sometimes. I'm pretty savvy, but some of the science is just like slightly above because,
yeah,
you know,
totally.
And she's really just so helpful in interpreting it and teasing it all apart. And so I'm glad that we're all connected. That's really great. So let's just take a step back, and I will give you a moment to introduce yourself and just kind of dive in. You had already mentioned that you were recently diagnosed with autism about 6 months ago. So if you could introduce yourself and then just tell us what led to that.
Yeah, for sure. So growing up, I pretty much had a normal childhood, and I understand now that autism is a really large spectrum, and my experience is obviously very different than many others. But I began in middle school sort of noticing how oftentimes like I would never really fit into a lot of the social structures. I was definitely considered maybe more of a nerd and kind of a loner, and I never really thought too much of it because I had, a core group of close friends, mostly one-on-one friendships, and it wasn't until later on in middle school and high school that I kind of experienced more of a rough patch with a lot of bullying and feeling isolated and left out. And in college, I actually went to Georgia Tech. So I grew up in Atlanta and ended up staying in town in my college. And during my freshman year, that's kind of when I realized, almost in kind of a inflection point early on, that the way I was going in my sort of social pursuits was not taking me to. I knew that I had to change something if I wanted to find, really important things, goals that I was setting out to do, to find a romantic partner, to be able to find a meaningful career. And I realized one of the largest strong suits for me was actually connecting with other people, because I realized, I think fairly differently, and it doesn't come naturally to me in a lot of social settings. So that's what kind of set me on a journey of today, fast forward almost 5 to 7 years. I'll give you an exact number in a second. Now we have a startup called Mentra that I have co-founded with a business partner I met at Georgia Tech. And we are actually creating a service online that's free for neurodivergent job seekers to actually find meaningful employment. So there's a lot that happened in between there, but that's just a quick intro.
I already have so many questions for you.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I could probably do a better intro than that, but
no,
we'll go with it.
That's perfect. I mean, it's kind of hard to put your life into like 3 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, I realized I was spending like way too long on the beginning and then kind of skipped over a lot of important stuff. But yeah.
That was perfect. Thank you. Before we dive into Mentra, did you seek out someone to talk to about maybe things that you were struggling with and then ended up getting an autism diagnosis? Or did you sort of have an aha moment through your work and say, maybe I'm on the spectrum?
Yeah, let me go into a little bit of backstory, I guess. So I've always been the kind of person that gets really deeply into my passions or special interests, as I now know they're called. And for me, growing up, I was really into coin collecting for the longest time. That was kind of my big pursuit. And then eventually actually almost started an eBay business on that. So at a young age, kind of learned how to run a business and kind of got a lot of that entrepreneurial experience selling used coins and rare paper money. And then throughout middle school, my brother ended up taking guitar lessons, and my parents kind of nudged me in the direction of taking lessons for an instrument, which I ended up choosing to be bass guitar, electric bass. And we ended up forming a band. So I had a couple of friends in my grade who joined us in the band. It was me and my brother and two others. And for close to 7 years, 5 to 7 years throughout almost all of middle school and early high school, that was kind of like my one big thing. And I got really, really into that. My parents were incredibly supportive, sent me to vocal lessons and bass lessons. And my dad was always helping us as a band manager to book shows. And in a lot of ways, my entire social life was sort of centered around that very particular pursuit. And it almost felt like a dual life, because when I was on the stage playing my music, and after I'd practiced so long with such a core group of friends in my band, I was feeling like on the top of the world. But then when I went into school, or even after the show, in a lot of cases, I would feel very left out and never really understood how there could be such a stark contrast between sort of those two realities, even in the same phase of life. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of just the preface to what ended up happening next. I went through basically two more special interests before actually coming to a diagnosis, but you can tell already there's some patterns here that, looking back, in hindsight is 2020, that I was definitely on the spectrum, obviously the whole time.
And I think that I just want to comment on your self-awareness at such a young age, because a lot of people, as you, I'm certain, are aware, go through life, and we have like a whole plethora of folks that are getting diagnosed like in their 40s right now. I don't want to take away or imply that they don't have self-awareness or self-reflection, or I just think that depending on your life circumstances, maybe you can't quite figure it out and make time to focus on yourself, on your wellness. It's especially if you have children, if you have a very demanding job, all these things that can get in the way. So I think that's really amazing that you identified with it early in life, and it seems to me that it has been extraordinarily helpful and insightful to you. Would that be accurate?
It really has. I was worried at first to come forth with the diagnosis even after I got it, but I think I've overcome that, obviously, first of all. And I think that looking back, if we talked maybe a year ago about these same experiences, I have a very unique path in the sense that a lot of my special interests and for example, I always got good grades in school, and a lot of my special interests I was able to really excel in those specific areas just after putting in, very, very diligent hours to whatever it is I was into at the time. And because of those successes, and because of the fact that I was hyperverbal even at a young age, in a lot of ways it would seem that there's no way that I could have been on the spectrum, because if you look at that sort of lens of where I was excelling at the time, you leave out all of the challenges that happen off the stage per se. And I think in a lot of ways, there's two ways to look at my story, and I'm sure many others have a similar path, where those on the spectrum who maybe are more successful and where their talents really do shine, which is amazing. And that's obviously where we want to get to as a society, where that everybody can experience that. There's still challenges beneath those successes in between that may not get brought to the surface. And in many cases, that will result in folks maybe never even seeking a diagnosis, never even considering that they might be on the spectrum. And finding out that information to me has been very, very helpful. I know a lot more now than I did, a year ago, so that's for sure.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask this. If you're not comfortable with answering it, you certainly don't have to, but you had mentioned before we started recording, we had a little bit of a conversation, and you had mentioned about dating, and I don't know if you've watched Love on the Spectrum. Have you watched that on Netflix?
Yeah. That's very funny you just mentioned it. I watched 10 minutes of it this morning, in fact. I haven't gotten myself to really sit through it yet because in a lot of ways it hits a little close to home. So I definitely see my own challenges in the show, and I think I need to watch it. I'm going to bring myself to watch it very soon.
Well, I can understand how that would be close to home for you, certainly. And for me as a parent, I kind of skipped over it for about a year. I mean, it kept coming up on my profile, and I just kept skipping over it. And a really dear friend of mine watched it, and she said, Di, you have to watch it. You are going to fall in love with this show. And I said, okay, if you're recommending it, I will. And I did. I fell in love with the show. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's a Love on the Spectrum US and a Love on the Spectrum Australia.
Yeah, I was watching the Australia one briefly.
Okay. And it was so lovely for so many reasons. And all of the people are so different, just like we all are very different. And the only reason I brought up the dating aspect was because I just think that for young adults, or just adults in general, who are diagnosed with autism, wherever they fall on the spectrum, I think this can be challenging. Relationships in general, friendships, dating, it can be challenging, these social interactions, and there's lots of rules around it and nuances. And what occurred to me was the lack of support that we have. There's this lovely woman who is on both shows, both the U.S. show as well as the Australia show, and she is they call her a relationship expert. But she's essentially mentoring these adults on where they are and coaching them to go on their very first date. And it's amazing. And she's so lovely and kind and compassionate, and always has a way of looking at it where she can pull out their strengths and turn it around to build up their confidence. It's truly amazing. I know this is very long-winded, but I think I get long-winded when I get passionate about a point. And it's just to say
I feel that.
It's just to say that we really need this as part of our social support for adults. So I just felt like I wanted to say that out loud because you had brought up the dating earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when it comes to dating, it's very, very complicated topic for anybody, but especially it's great to see a show like Love on the Spectrum that really portrays, I think, some of the day-to-day challenges and also the aspect of coaching and having sort of that voice of independent judgment to tell you where your strengths are and let's be honest about maybe where your weaknesses are as well. And also just kind of to talk through things, because a lot of times it's not obvious, and I am very bad. I'll just tell you straight up, I am very bad at reading between the lines, always have been, probably always will be. I can put a lot of energy into it, and maybe there's some guesswork that can go on, and I can try, but it takes a lot of energy, and it will never come naturally to me. And I think, related to that point, actually, so in college, at the time, my special interest was cycling, so I kind of shifted over from music to road cycling, and I was very interested into it. I actually was on the racing team and was riding almost 20 to 30 hours a week, so a couple hundred miles a week. And one of the aspects of my freshman year that was really distinct was that I had trouble talking to pretty much anybody outside of my close friend group, especially of the opposite gender. It's something that about halfway through my freshman year, after essentially not going to any parties or any events because of that challenge, one of my close friends at the time gave me that kind of harsh wake-up call that, look, Connor, if you continue to go down the path you're going, you think you're going to find love, because right now you're not even creating the opportunity to meet others, and even if you did, you're not giving yourself the chance to practice. And that was really hard to hear and to think through that, because sure. Until hearing that, I never really put two and two together, if you know what I mean.
Of course. And I just want to acknowledge what a wonderful friend, right? I know that was hard to hear.
I didn't think that at the time, but yes, I agree. He was a good, really told me what I needed to hear.
Sometimes it does take your good friends to point out the hard things that none of us can see. And it is hard to hear, and it's a big cup of tea to swallow. With time, we usually, this is such a general statement, but we usually do end up saying, they were right.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was just sort of a sidebar conversation, but I'm glad we addressed it, because I know a lot of the listeners, they fall in this category of sort of struggling and trying to navigate the dating dynamics. And the last thing I'm going to say is I actually spoke to my youngest son's former speech therapist today, and she is relocating, but she also watched Love on the Spectrum. And we're going to really promote this show on the podcast today. But one of the strengths that this particular speech therapist had was social groups. She doesn't quite know how she's going to do it, but she wants to focus on relationship support. And I was so happy to hear that, because it's like, well, at least we have one person who's interested, and even though she's going out of state, it'll help people in that area. And it's just, for me, another point of advocacy that we really need to work on in Maryland. Needs to be worked on everywhere, but because I'm in Maryland and because I'm out for the state, that's definitely going into the bucket because it's needed. Tell me, if you would, about your internship at Tesla and how that unfolded.
Well, there's a whole lot that happened. So first of all, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I think we'll lead into all of that. But for me at the time, after drinking the big cup of tea and feeling really angry at first, and then eventually taking a step back and looking at the challenge as an engineer that I am, I realized that to grow my social skills, I had to be very intentional at giving myself the chance to practice, just like anything, like cycling. To me, I was not good when I started. Music, same thing. Everything for me takes practice, and especially social skills. They didn't come naturally. So I was very nervous to be able to sort of even branch out and give myself the chance to fall down, as it were, around pretty much the place I grew up, it was Atlanta, Georgia. So I made a concerted effort to basically redo my entire wardrobe, and really got involved on Reddit to learn about male fashion, and how I found some great YouTube shows that really helped me understand like how to go and practice social skills. And I actually had the opportunity, very grateful for the opportunity, to move to Australia for just about a year as part of an exchange program, which is where in Sydney, at the international house I was living in, I would actually go to the opera house and I would introduce myself to strangers hundreds of times over and over again, with many, many clumsy and awkward conversations that sometimes would be very cringeworthy. And after a really long time of doing this, day after day, I ended up meeting some other good friends down there who were kind of on a very similar path, specifically introducing myself to anybody with the goal at the time of being able to get comfortable to meet girls. Through that process, I learned sort of the process of how I could be confident in sharing my story and in connecting with strangers, and in doing so in a way that didn't make other people feel uncomfortable, because despite all of my intentions to be, I'm never coming from the wrong place of heart. Sometimes the way I approached people could come across in the wrong way, and that was something I had to learn the hard way. But all of that is to say, when I came back to Atlanta after that experience, thankfully, none of the hard parts of that carried back, because they were all people I had never, basically the other side of the world, right? That's the benefit of, that's actually the reason why I went so far away, because I didn't want to feel like, I wanted to feel free to fall so that I could learn. And when I came back, I actually took a lot of those skills and a lot of that confidence to introduce myself to people on campus and sort of reinvent who I was. And one of the people I introduced myself to was actually a Tesla recruiter. So that kind of leads into all of that. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but
I absolutely love this story. This is so inspiring, and I commend you for making yourself vulnerable, challenging yourself, and your quote, I wrote this down, Connor, because I thought it was so beautiful: free to fall so I could learn. You moved very far away so you could give yourself that opportunity. This is going to inspire so many adults out there. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, no, I hope it helps. And I mean, it's not easy to go, and especially going from very limited social interactions. Obviously, most of the ones I did have before going to Australia were very cringeworthy from an outsider's view. I didn't know that. I wasn't even aware of that. But when I sort of made that active effort, I quickly learned and got to realize, and a lot of times I would even go up to strangers and I would tell them, I didn't know I was on the spectrum, but I would tell them that, hey, I'm here, I'm introducing myself, I want to learn about your story, and I am on a mission to introduce myself to strangers and learn about people's stories so that I can improve my social skills. That's kind of, I would tell people that straight up so that they were able to give me feedback and not just dismissing me as some weirdo. They were actually able to say, okay, this person's actually trying to learn to be social. And I got a lot of great feedback that way that really helped me. And
I love that so much. What a wonderful, insightful way to approach it all. Just being honest and putting it out there.
It definitely, looking back, almost seems like I had an intervention on myself to some extent,
Yeah.
But I was blessed to have a couple of friends beforehand who really helped me go and spend hours and hours in the mall, throwing out almost all of my wardrobe before I left, to set me up for a chance at success. because trust me, the appearance, as much as I didn't like to think it, appearance matters. And if you want to have a chance at success, you need to have a good first impression. And eventually, with a lot of practice, I was able to get to the point where I was able to make some really great friends down there. And it really changed who I was as a person. Anybody who knew me from before could tell you I was a completely different person when I returned just 8 months later.
This is an amazing, incredible success story that was self-initiated. Kudos to you. This is awesome.
Thank you. I haven't shared this story too much prior to getting my diagnosis outside of my close friends, but it's one of the biggest things that I've reflected on after being diagnosed is how that whole part of my life really changed the game for me, and how specifically being on the spectrum and experiencing those challenges, like I needed the boot camp of trial and error and a very specific goal of 100 cold approach interactions. That was my focus at the time, and it became my special interest.
Well, thank you for being open and vulnerable to sharing. It sounds like you came back from Australia, and that's when you met the recruiter from Tesla then, when you returned back to campus?
Absolutely, yeah. So this kind of transitions a little bit into more of my experience with the job finding process. And of course, I had already gone through this self-intervention, as whatever you might call it. So when I returned back to campus, it was my junior year, and I knew that I really wanted to get some work experience and some excuse to get out again, to leave Atlanta, basically, because I had come back to Atlanta and I'm around all these old friends, and I found myself falling back into old habits, and I needed a new goal to keep me motivated, so that I thought at the time maybe I would just go back into being really timid and lose my confidence. So I wanted something to continue to grow my confidence. And for me, I channeled that a lot. There weren't too many channels for me to meet girls at Georgia Tech that I knew of at the time. So I began to channel a lot of that instead to the job finding process, which, as strange as it may sound, in my head was very similar in a lot of ways to dating, because you're putting yourself out there, you are looking at, essentially showcasing your value prop on a resume, which is kind of ridiculous, similar to, I guess, a online dating profile. It's a little bit absurd to try to encapsulate your whole personality in just a single document, but it's not really about the document. Just like online dating, it's about actually meeting people and using your network. And when you do have those interactions, making the most of them. So for me, my strategy was very focused on understanding and beginning to learn about how networking really works in the professional sense. And I was lucky one night studying for an exam. I actually had the exam the next day, and I was cramming pretty late. And I overheard the table next to me was talking about solar racing at Georgia Tech in the student common area. And I was really interested in what they were talking about. And I was pretty tired of studying. So I pretty much decided to go and kind of cold introduce myself to the whole table, which is it's like a double black diamond from where I was before. So like a really challenging introduction would be to introduce yourself kind of on a whim to a whole group. It's easy maybe if it's just one person, but I did it, and they welcomed me into the conversation. And one of the members at the table was actually a recruiter from Tesla. And after the Solar Racing Club kind of ended, learned a lot about what they were doing. It was really exciting. I got to connect with that recruiter, and he gave me some feedback on my resume after I asked for it. And later on that evening, I was invited to an info session they were holding on campus. And I walk into this conference hall where the info session is, and there's almost 2,000 engineering students. It's really popular. And I almost wanted to leave. There was no way, with my experience, even having good grades, that I didn't think that I stood a chance in that room. So I was about to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, okay, well, let's just like at least hear what they have to say, because I love Tesla. I absolutely loved it. The company, the car, Elon, everything. There's some controversy around some of it, but I was really into it at the time. And I stayed. And at the end of the event, I ended up eyeing that same recruiter I talked to earlier, and everyone was sort of lined up to give their resume. And I ended up going to his line. I wanted to say hi to him. And I did. I ended up telling him, thanks for the resume advice. And I told him that over the last 3 hours between when I first met him, just a couple hours ago, and the info session, that I had called all my friends and family and my old employer, and I had taken his advice, and I had updated my resume, because I did. And he put it in a separate pile. I remember that vividly. He put it in a separate pile. He put a little mark on it. And that's when I knew I might actually have a chance at getting the internship.
That is so cool.
Of course, I did. I did end up getting a call back a couple months later that I got it. So that was essentially for me the big break. Yeah.
Wow. Did you think about it a lot, or did you think, oh, I guess I didn't get it? Because a couple months is a long time for not hearing anything.
Oh, I knew that something special had happened when he put it in a separate pile, but
yeah.
I probably lost hope after like a couple weeks. I knew that I was on the right approach, though. I knew that meeting him and actually getting the FaceTime with the recruiter, I would stand zero chance in the main pile. Let me just tell you that. In the separate pile, I thought it was still a long shot. It ended up working out. And I think the moral of that story is there's so many things that sort of had to happen for me to get the opportunity. Number one, I had to have the confidence to be able to literally cold approach like an entire group of strangers. Like a year before, that would be probably the most daunting thing you could ever ask of me, ever. And I did it. And then the fact that all of those different experiences tied together to make that possible, it's a lot of luck, but it's also a lot of deliberate focus, I think, that ended up paying off in a way I could have never predicted.
Absolutely. And you're self-reflecting again. This is such a strength of yours, and it's going to take you so far in life. You're going to do such amazing things. You already have, but this is just the beginning for you, because these skills that you have are really, really special. To be able to self-reflect and recognize and acknowledge the alignment of everything to make things work out to your benefit. And that was a very generalized statement I just said. I mean, I could dig deep into that, but I don't want to lose my audience in a philosophical discussion. But my goodness, this is amazing, and you really truly have such a strong skill set. So you got
Thank you so much.
call. Of course, you got the call, and then when was the internship, and how long was it? And tell us about that experience. Yeah,
sure. So I'm just going to be very blunt. I was not qualified for that internship. I had maybe done one info session on Tableau, and I put Tableau on my resume after that info session. I had only done one work experience before at a local eBay wholesaler recycling shop, which, it's helpful to do eBay at a younger age for that. But I was not Tesla caliber, as it were, and I knew that. But when I got the call back, it was late December, and they were, I guess, desperate to fill some internships for January, because the summer is very popular and very competitive, but apparently the January semester was not. So I was actually already registered for classes. With hardly 3 weeks of notice, I ended up accepting the offer, obviously. I was super into that. And then 2 weeks later, I was on a cross-country road trip to California to start a new career, basically. And there was a lot of hard work in the beginning to catch up and really learn Tableau, because the entire role was in Tableau. and SQL. But those were solvable challenges for me, after several 80-hour weeks. I was a whiz at the software. So another lesson there is, if you see bullet points on a job description, and then you look at your experience and you say, I may not have those bullets, I would say maybe be a little bit more aggressive in applying anyway. And if you have a little bit of experience in something, you should showcase that. If you're confident you can learn those skills, given a month of time. So I was a little bit overconfident with that, and it ended up working out.
Well, you believed in yourself, and you knew you could do it.
Yeah, totally. It's hard to be overconfident when you're getting rejected hundreds and hundreds of times. I will tell you that, and I can tell you that from experience personally, the dating side and the introducing myself to strangers. But I can also tell you from the job hunt perspective that so many folks who are applying over and over again, they may not have the experience on their resume. We have folks who have applied 500 times and they're getting nothing back. So basically, There's a big gap here, and my story is, I don't know how you would quantify it, but it's, I think, a pretty rare one, where we look at neurodiversity and neurodivergence in general sitting around an 80% unemployment rate, and then 20% getting employed with kind of these either Ivy League degrees or just absolutely kind of big break moments that are, of course, a mix of hard work and luck, but not scalable to everybody. I'm not saying that everybody can take the path I took, not in any sense of it. But I think that's exactly why, after going to a Tesla internship and ended up extending for 8 months and doing really well there, I came back to Georgia Tech, and I was really inspired by the way that Tesla as a company had rallied so many of their employees behind this greater mission, which in their case was accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. It's a sort of a higher calling that motivated people to a level I had never seen. Some of the smartest people I've ever met at that internship. And when I came back, I really missed that feeling. And after coming back from a Tesla internship, I had a lot more opportunities, of course, than the year before. Just having the resume experience and having really demonstrated that. So I was very confident, and I ended up wanting to find a way to help other people at Georgia Tech initially, but other people with similar challenges to me the year before, to help find their big breaks. That's why I actually joined TEDx and began coaching a lot of people in my degree program on how to write their resumes, how to improve their LinkedIn profile, and really how to kind of just cold reach out to recruiters and land their interviews. So I spent a lot of time on that. And as an organizer of TEDx, I also wanted to explore some other areas to put my energy into, because I was looking for the next big passion that I could contribute to, passion project. And that's where I actually met Jillica. Now you're caught up to the present day. I think you watched her TED Talk. That TED Talk, I was her coach. I was her speaking coach for that. And she shared the story of her brother, Vikram, who was non-speaking on the spectrum. And he, for 27 years, never spoke a word in his life, being taught the ABCs over and over and over again. In some cases, he'd watch the same TV show over and over and over again in different languages. And at age of 27, Jillica had found this therapy, which some might know in the audience here, spelling to communicate, also known as RPM. And she convinced her family to move from Dubai to Atlanta, Georgia, to teach Vikram how to type. And after going through about 6 months of instruction on S2C, he actually began to type, and boy, oh boy, did he shatter everyone's perception on his intelligence. Now Vikram is an incredible poet. He's began to go viral online. He's revealed that by watching the same TV shows over and over in different languages, he self-taught himself many languages. He's absolutely brilliant. And the story really inspired me. I didn't know I was on the spectrum at the time, but something really resonated about what Jalica's brother was able to do, and sort of her call to action was that technologists at Georgia Tech should be focusing on helping this community. And in a big way, that's what started Mentra.
So, Connor, I have to tell you, I was so excited when I dove into your background and found Jalica's TEDx talk, and then learned more about her brother Vikram and that he was doing Spell to Communicate. And I knew right away when I read the blurb that that is what was happening. And then to learn more about it, about his insight at 27, I mean, I never will get used to the kids and adults whose lives are forever changed by learning Spell to Communicate, or the like you said, rapid prompting method, or typing. There's various avenues, but the same sort of logic is behind it. And I just want to share with you that my son Colin, he's younger than Vikram. He's just turned 16 recently. He also is non-speaking. He regressed when he was about, well, I would say probably between like 12 and 14 months. So he did have a little bit of language, but then lost it. And so he has some occasional spontaneous language, but it's very inconsistent, and it's, sometimes we'll go months, sometimes a whole year without hearing his voice, and then all of a sudden he'll start vocalizing again. He started Spell to Communicate about 6 months ago. So he is right about sort of it sounds like where Vikram had his major breakthrough and announced to the world everything that he truly knows. Colin is not quite to that level of, he's still learning. He's not open yet like Vikram. He's still learning the techniques, but has learned so much. He is a phenomenal speller, and he is phenomenal in his reading comprehension. I mean, literally, I'm blown away at what this kid has brought to us.
That is so amazing.
And there is no doubt that he is, in terms of knowledge, he's right there with his peer groups at 16, but I would have to venture that he's probably beyond, because some of the knowledge he knows just by doing the exercises in Spell to Communicate is like blowing my mind. So I'm so excited and encouraged and empowered. And Colin is so excited and empowered. When his therapist shows up to practice, he's just so happy. He is so thrilled because it's changing his world. And these people who have not been able to express themselves their whole lives, finally it's opening themselves up to the world. And I could talk about this forever, but I will stay on track and just tell you that I love that this is just another part of the autistic community or disability community that Mentra is supporting through the job support program. It's really amazing.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I am so excited for you to be able to really hear Colin's voice. And it's amazing that you have access to such an important tool, which in so many of the non-speaking community, they may not have access to the tool of Spelling to Communicate or an equivalent AAC. But for those who are fortunate enough to have it, I think it gives a really huge lesson to the rest of us that even many times those with the best of intentions may not be able to see the full value in somebody without the right tool and environment. And that's very encouraging that Colin has that, and I'm super excited for you both and for him.
Thank you so much. Tell us more about your company. I have a better understanding of sort of the idea of how it was born, but like give us more information about it and how it works and how people can find you.
Absolutely. So I'll just say this first of all, Diana, that whoever is on your audience who's listened this far, pretty much everybody in the audience can help in some way in creating better employment prospects for neurodivergence. And I'm about to explain how, but first I want to explain Mentra. So what ended up happening after meeting Jillica and that TED Talk is we actually worked for almost 2 years with the autism community in and around Atlanta to understand the key pain points around employment. Of course, I didn't know myself at the time I was a part of the community, but I began to realize after working with many of the folks. And time and again, we began to see the same problems that I myself had experienced around employment, where so many times you have these brilliant folks who can't get into the right opportunities because of the recruitment process in particular. And if they do make it in, there's a couple of accommodations, hurdles that they need to get through. And of course, the employer needs to be inclusive, but given the right environment and the right accommodations, they all have such a capacity to bring huge value to the workforce. That's amazing for them. That's actually great for the employers as well. And that's one of the key sort of tenets of Mentra that we're out there to prove is the business value of actually hiring and employing neurodivergents. And we're proving that across all industries, not just technology, although it's a big focus, but even in human-facing roles, customer-facing roles, there is huge potential for the community, and it's such a diverse community. So kind of at the core of what we've built over almost the past 3.5 years now. Granted, I worked with a financial institution for about 2 years, with Mentra being a side hustle project. And then recently this year, we raised funding to go full-time on it, which is super exciting. So Mentra, www.mentra.me, that website, is an employment network for the neurodiverse community. And we serve 3 key goals. Number 1, we are unlocking neurodiverse talent for employers. Employers in the past, they have overlooked the talent pool, either because the recruitment process naturally screens out neurodivergence just due to the lack of experience, or because it's challenging to understand how to make the right job placements, and they don't want to take on the risk. So we're removing those barriers with our platform, and I'll tell you how. But for neurodivergents themselves, we're providing a complete alternative to today's broken system. No longer do you have to apply 500 times and go out and somehow meet the recruiters through whatever stroke of luck channel that you kind of have to do in the traditional process. You can now apply one time to Mentra, and it's about a 20 to 30 minute online application. And we actually generate a digital profile that showcases all of your skills, strengths, environmental sensitivities, required accommodations, as well as your neurodivergent, neuro-exceptional traits. It's a really holistic profile of an individual. It goes a lot deeper than just the resume. And we find meaningful opportunities that really allow those every job seeker that signs up to thrive. And then the third part of what we do is we're bringing together the partner service provider ecosystem. So whether that's universities, job coaches, advocacy groups, parent groups, support groups, we're bringing them together on a platform where they can provide those services and support to all of the job seekers in the form of upskilling, training, even training for employers, as well as, of course, the job seekers themselves. So that's in a nutshell what we do. Our service is entirely free for job seekers, and we are primarily keeping the lights on with employer revenue. So that's transparently how it works. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I just wanted to put 2 thoughts out there. You had earlier mentioned that about 80% of folks diagnosed with autism are unemployed. And I just wanted to circle back around with that because I recently had this discussion with one of our local delegates. And I just want people to know that this isn't a Georgia issue. This is a national issue. So it's
it's an international issue. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for even taking it a step further and clarifying that. International.
It's an international issue with the recruitment process. Let's be really clear. This is a super talented community. We've seen time and again 78% more loyal employees amongst the neurodivergent population. We've seen 30% higher productivity. The list goes on, and we're continuing to prove that out through a number of pilots and case studies that hopefully Mentra can be a source of data and a source of confidence as we grow. But essentially, how it works, and the platform itself is live today. We are in beta. We have an entirely neurodivergent team. 90% of us are neurodivergent, so we take feedback into account from the community, and we work hand in hand with perspectives from the entire community to basically build the most accessible platform possible to really serve the needs and bring together this patchwork of different resources into a centralized place where we can move the needle on employment. And for an employer standpoint, we're actually able to provide them with a percent match based on both an algorithm and a pre-screening that we do to flip the script around applying for a job. So whereas the traditional process, you have to apply for a job, and if you don't get that one job, you just kind of ghosted. You get no feedback and nothing. This time around with Mentra, you apply one time, and employers are matched to you based on all of these different factors, including the accommodations and the environmental sensitivities, the culture, and communication style, and so forth. And when an employer is matched to a job seeker, they're able to see that information, that holistic digital profile. And if they want to proceed with actually taking a job seeker to the next steps in the process, only if they want to proceed do we actually contact the job seeker. So from a job seeker perspective, you create your profile, you can express interest in jobs, you can go to upskilling programs, you can continue to improve your showcase non-traditional work samples and improve your profile. But you're not going to get contacted by employers until you have a real qualified lead. And when you do, the employer is committed to giving you feedback if you don't advance. There's no more black holes. There's no more ghosting. It's very humanized. And if a recruiter or hiring manager wants to move forward with you, they are committing to giving you at least a phone screen. And then if you don't get hired, they're committing to giving you feedback that's personalized. So we're really changing the narrative. We're able to do that by collecting 70% of the data that we collect is not collected on any other service. So LinkedIn and Indeed, resumes, they look at work experience and education, and that's pretty much it. We go a whole lot deeper than that.
This is incredible. I mean, I love that. Flip the script. There is such an incredible need for this. Like you said, you're humanizing the process. Everyone deserves a phone call and feedback. And I don't understand how it just doesn't happen, but it doesn't. And thank you to Mentra for taking that on and making sure that it does happen.
Absolutely. I mean, from an employer perspective, we can understand why to some extent, because they're looking for the best talent to immediately fill the role. And for the most part, they're looking for talent that they have pretty high confidence will do the job well. So that they could take in 100 or 500 applicants and end up only looking at around 20, and they don't have the time to respond to 500. But that simply doesn't work for the neurodivergent population. So if you want to hire from the neurodiverse community and you want to work with Mentra, we are absolutely happy to provide you with a solution that allows employers to really build an inclusive process. But there is a little bit of difference in that the employer needs to be able to spend a bit of extra time describing the job posting. It's not just a job description. We actually create an inclusive job profile, and we understand a lot more around the accommodations, the environment, the communication style. It doesn't take that much longer for a recruiter, but they put in a little bit of extra work. But in turn, they get access to this hugely talented pool of job seekers that are traditionally, underutilized. And those employers that are able to put in a little bit of extra time, they reap a huge benefit in terms of having a competitive advantage and being able to access some of the most talented individuals in the workforce that their peers aren't seeing. So we help with that, and our platform directly enables that by making the process friendly and inclusive and holistic to every job seeker so that we have such a strong talent pool in the first place.
Is part of your team delegated to focus on reaching out to employers and recruitment?
Yeah.
And then I guess this part of the question would just be, do you provide those potential employers with tools? Because it is a learning curve if you're not part of our community.
Of course. We absolutely do. So the platform itself is built in a way that covers a lot of the essentials. For example, when you are posting a job as an employer, let's say the employer doesn't know anything about neurodiversity hiring. They just want a great data analyst, for lack of a better example. They can go onto the platform, and we're going to ask them a lot of detail about not just the nature of the job, but also about the environment and all these other factors that we take into account. And then we're able to use our algorithm that we developed to actually look at candidates who not only have the aptitude, which, by the way, might not be in the form of traditional work experience, could be in many forms that we look at. But we'll show them candidates that both have the aptitude, the interest, as well as the environmental fit to succeed in that particular environment, which is, of course, really make or break in this particular community. You could put me in an environment where I have all of the best tools in the world to do a great job with Tableau and SQL, but if you're not giving me clear and written communication, chances are I'm not gonna stay there very long, and I'm probably not gonna get too much good work done. That's just being honest, because that's a really important part of the job fit that doesn't come across on resume. So we make that in our match process. We're setting folks up for success. We also train our employers and vet them to make sure that they're inclusive and they have the right support. So that's all part of our package to employers, and what the job seekers get is a tailored experience that's sort of built for them and is already pre-vetted on the employer side.
So then, as far as the job seeker, let's just use someone like Vikram or Colin who are non-speaking. And I guess it's a more of a generalized question, because as you said earlier, not everyone has the ability to have this resource of learning spell to communicate for a variety of reasons. Let's be honest, there actually aren't even enough therapists at this point to train everyone who's probably interested. But for a job interview, so someone like Vikram could use his iPad or keyboard and type everything out.
He needs a communication partner, actually. Vikram does.
Okay. So maybe that is the answer to what I'm trying to ask then. You would basically help support the potential employee to prepare for the interview with their communication partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. The service is designed for non-speakers. We believe that's a huge portion of the neurodivergent talent pool, and we're working on finding opportunities that work well for non-speakers. We also have one of our questions right in the beginning is whether or not you'll require a communication partner throughout the process. So that's definitely something we support. And, we envision a future as well where sort of that third part of the platform is the service provider ecosystem. So we envision a future where you might even be able to find a communication partner in another state through Mentra, and maybe one day it can be at least partially covered by the employer, depending on the situation. But we're working towards building an ecosystem where that service provider ecosystem is also centralized and really baked into the process of finding a job, because it's a big part of it.
This sounds so incredible, Connor. I am So excited for our community, and I can't thank you and your colleagues enough for your vision and your perseverance and hard work every day, because there is such a need. As a parent advocate, 80% unemployment rate, we can't have it. It's 100% unacceptable.
100% unacceptable.
That 80% are unemployed.
There is hope, and I want to tie it in really quick to what I mentioned earlier, that for those who have the dedication to listen this far in, every single person listening can do something about it. And that is, whether we have any recruiters in the room, obviously that'd be great to connect. So feel free to go to our website, click on the employers page. But for job seekers and parents and any other service providers, we all play a part here, because the strength and the whole role of our team, you asked the question, Diana, do we go and bring employers on? That's pretty much my entire job, is to make the business pitch to employers to show them that there's really a huge talent pool that they're kind of more or less sleeping on. And it's true. And we provide the tools to access the talent pool. But that pitch becomes a whole lot easier when we have strength in numbers. We have employers today who they want to post 3,000 jobs on the platform. Well, as of this recording, we don't quite even have 1,000 job seekers. We can't bring that employer on until we reach 3,000 job seekers, at least. So we're working really hard on the other side, and my colleagues are working heavily on this, is our strategy to actually bring together this entire movement of neurodiversity, neurodivergence, coming together into a single centralized platform for the first time in history, by the way. We've always been on the sidelines, kind of isolated, separated. There's no way for employers to really take us seriously unless we have a strength in numbers, centralized place for them to come and see the talent pool. So everybody can help by sharing www.mentra.me. And if you yourself are neurodivergent, sign up, because we are a lifetime service. Even if you already have a job, you can create a profile and you can share the service to your friends. You can actually refer a friend and win fidget cubes and stickers. And if and when you ever want to make a career change, you can just flip a switch on the top of your profile and set your status to seeking work. If you are a parent and you know anybody who's seeking work or who will be in the next 5 years, never too early to begin creating a profile and exploring different career areas. We do serve folks 18 and over, but we can create profiles for folks under 18 if they want to get started ahead of time. And yes, we can all share the mission and prove to the world that there's a huge value in our community, which is my goal.
I love the mission so much. And as you said, yes, strength in numbers. It's the only way to move this forward collectively. I have one more question before we go into the lighter part of our conversation, although this has been such a lovely conversation. It hasn't been, a difficult one in terms of struggles. This has all been so enlightening. But before we go into the questions I'm going to ask you that I ask all my guests, is Tesla, or should I say, is Elon helping you? Is he providing funding for this project? Because if not, we must get him on board.
That is a great question. This is a very funny question. I can't tell you our investor yet. It's not public, but I can tell you that our largest investor in Mentra is Neurodivergent and works very closely with Elon Musk. Elon himself is not yet on board, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility if we can prove some traction in our early case studies here.
I have the biggest smile on my face. I'm so happy. So happy for all of you and I'm for our community. And I just can't wait to get this out on my platform because I'm so excited for the listeners to hear this conversation. Final 4 questions, because I know that you're super busy and I've kept you a long time. I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness in this conversation.
Absolutely.
May I ask you, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book If you have not read it, if you have not heard of it, I would recommend The Third Door by Alex Benayan. I don't believe he's neurodiverse, but he is a big inspiration of mine in terms of being able to go out and really put myself out there. His whole philosophy is basically, if you think of life as a nightclub, and I'm not a huge fan of nightclubs, but this is his example. Think of life as a nightclub. There's three ways into the club. You could either wait in line, like the rest of us normal folks, which could take forever, by the way. You may never make it in. Or you could be born into wealth and go through the VIP entrance, which is, of course, only a very select few. Or you could take the third door, which is where you go around the back, you climb over the bush, you knock on the kitchen window, and you let the cook to let you in, and you go down the hallway and then make it in that way. And his whole philosophy is that there's always a third door in life, and he himself lived that through his experience, going from basically a broke college dropout to interviewing Bill Gates and some of the most successful entrepreneurs of our time. So definitely if you want to learn more, read the book. It's an awesome book, and definitely inspired me.
Sounds like it. That sounds wonderful. Okay, so the second question is, what would your dream vacation be?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, when my work is done, I will want to go to New Zealand. I love New Zealand. Living in Australia for a while, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and the people there are just so accepting of, everybody and so loving in general. And the country's just absolutely beautiful. So that will be my quiet life after a long journey ahead, I'm sure.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, what do you do for self-care or just to recharge? Yeah,
sure. So in the past, I would have definitely told you cycling, and to some extent, that's still my answer. Love to cycle and just be in nature. Nowadays, I actually am working a lot, obviously, probably like 80 to 100 hours a week. But when I do get to go out, I try to make the most of my breaks every other weekend. I live in North Carolina, so about 2 hours away. There's a beautiful section of the Appalachian Trail, and I like to go out on a Saturday with my backpack and my tent and everything in for the whole weekend, and just turn off the phone and live in the woods for 2 days. And that goes a long way to, getting some clarity and some perspective.
One with nature. I love that.
Exactly.
And then the final question is, what is your best advice for you? I'm going to ask about peers and colleagues. And I think, by the way, you have already given us a plethora of wonderful advice, so it's okay if you repeat yourself.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you can kind of see the themes that dating and employment are pretty similar. So my advice will be pretty similar for both, which is when you're looking to put yourself out there, it's really important to be patient and accepting of the pitfalls, but also putting yourself in a position where you're able to get the feedback from those pitfalls. Because if I was in Australia and I never opened up about my story, people would have never given me feedback. They would have just said, wow, this guy, this weirdo, he should go away or something. But because I was open about my story and vulnerable and honest and transparent, and I was asking for, the help and the feedback, people gave me great feedback. And that's what helped me. So in order to get the feedback, you have to be vulnerable, in my opinion. And, that's really kind of the core advice I would have. But of course, we are here to help, and I would love to help as many people as possible with Mentra. So if you are a neurodivergent job seeker and you're trying to find work, do check us out, www.mentra.me. And we're in beta. Guess what? We're still learning. I'll be vulnerable about that. So if you have any feedback for us, we are by no means complete, so we will accept any feedback. You can email us on the site. My email is Conner, CONNER, at Mentra, MENTRA.me. Send me a note if you have any ideas, feedback. Always looking to learn from the community.
Oh, that's wonderful, Conner. And thank you for opening that up to the community. And of course you would, because you understand it very clearly. But we learn best from one another and from the people who have autism and the people that have ADHD and whatever else it might be. That's who we learn best from. And I can't thank you enough again. I just have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and could talk to you for much longer, but I realized that you do need to eat dinner and regroup. And my son's probably like, what is she doing in there? She's been in there way longer than an hour. But it was just such a pleasure.
So much. Have a great evening.